You guys are releasing Below Zero on multiple platforms, and you said you've already confirmed that you're not working on multiplayer at this time, but are you working on a cross-save implication? For me, like, I would love to be able to play on my Xbox, and then when I go on the road, have my Switch, and then continue my game from my Xbox onto my Switch. Is cross-save something you guys have tried before or thinking about implementing?
I am not sure how the console makers feel about that sort of thing. I don't think we've talked about, like, for the individual platforms, there's some cloud support, but I think I'd have to follow up with you later to get you the breakdown of like what's supported where. Like personally in my house, I've mostly been looking at the Xbox version. So it's, we've got cloud support, it goes over from Windows Store to your Xbox One, and it can carry forward to your Series X. But I get a little lost with all the details now that we're in transition and there's all these different ways that.
So you kind of have it on Xbox and PC for Windows 10 currently, but like for the other consoles, It's like not being worked on right now.
Yeah, not like cross console ecosystem either. We don't have that. So
I think it's interesting because, obviously this is multiplayer, but crossplay is something that's like fairly common in games now. And even 10 years ago, it would have been not even a discussion to have your game on multiple platforms that could play with each other. And it's interesting just how far we've come with cross-save and servers and cloud-based gaming. What does that open up for your team, having that cloud service via the PC and the Xbox? Does it make things more difficult for you? Just another kind of thing to work on, or is it like help you expand like the user base for Subnautica?
It is. I mean, it presents unique challenges because often we're relying on somebody's specific cloud service, right? Like we're in the Microsoft ecosystem, so we have to use their cloud service in order to get that kind of cross-platform support. Like doing something that was across different console ecosystems would require us to roll our own. And so then, there's all the additional upkeep and, working on server code and having to make sure like we're storing everybody's save games and that we've got proper backups. It's actually kind of nice that the individual ecosystems, like have those platforms for us because it's good value for their consumers. But yeah, it's a little bit of overhead. Every platform has its own challenges that we have to like think about and take on. We don't want to like support a platform in a, kind of half-assed way. Like we want to make sure we're doing right by the players on those platforms.
As far as your specific job title is concerned, is it more difficult wrangling a smaller team, or is it easier to have like a bigger team with like multiple departments that kind of are in charge and you guys all come together? Is it a matter of what's the word I'm trying to look for? Is it do both of those kind of environments present their own set of challenges, or do you prefer one environment over another in terms of like big teams of like 200 people to smaller teams like your studio?
Right. I've never directed a game this large. I mean, I've never directed a game before or been in the project leadership role. I did have my own studio that was small, smaller than Unknown Worlds, called Tiger Style. It was basically me and a partner, and we had, a bunch of collaborators. I think even at our size, there's a little bit of hierarchy. Maybe 30-ish people working on Below Zero at a time. And often it is important that like there's a group of people who are more involved in like cross-discipline decision making, who are talking really regularly, and then they kind of communicate out to people who are maybe a little bit more specialized. But we try to keep everything really open, and I think this is just the DNA of the company. We came from a place where the company was kind of a flat structure. We don't want to shut people out of discussions. Like we want, like everything to be out in the open, and like, we think that good ideas can come from anywhere on the team. So, but yeah, the more people there are, the harder it gets to kind of like keep that focus, especially deep in development when you kind of need people to be a little bit on task.
And speaking of that, like, did the stay-at-home orders affect the development of Below Zero at all?
Not really, because we're a distributed studio. The home office of Unknown Worlds was in San Francisco, but so the two owners and some of the other folks, a handful of people live out there and would work in that office, but don't anymore. And they decided to kind of close the office and just go full distributed. But yeah, like mostly day to day, things are the same. used to get together once every 9 to 12 months, like somewhere in the world. We'd fly everybody out and, you know, have this retreat where we'd get to know each other as human beings and not just like faces on a monitor. And that's really important to our process, and we haven't been able to do that, so that kind of hurts. But overall, it's been kind of business as usual for us. I think we're super fortunate that we're in that position where we can kind of just keep doing our thing.
I think there's a lot of video game studios that have already been remote for years, and they were really ahead of the curve when they had to shut down office environments to like have everyone work at home, you know, trying to figure out the VPN situation and the security issues. And if people as certain staffers are good at working at home, because not everyone's as, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Well versed in working at home under their own hours, you know what I mean? Because it can be a process for certain people for that reason. But it sounds like you guys were already like way ahead of the game on that regard.
Yeah, I think so. I've been working remotely for something like 12, 13 years now. So it does feel a little second nature. The idea of going into an office actually gives me like night terrors. I just don't want to be in a commute. Like I like being at home and managing my own time, but it is true that not everybody wants that necessarily or is good at it. And it is an adjustment. You have to kind of learn how to communicate in an environment that's distributed. Also, because I think we're a bit more distributed than a lot of companies. I think we had at our peak 8 different time zones. I was living in Melbourne, Australia when I started the project lead position. We had people in Taiwan, France, Siberia, the UK, basically all 4 time zones in the continental US. So meetings are tricky, you know, and you have to be able to like communicate asynchronously sometimes. Like, oh, okay, I need to tell people what I've been working on. I need to really be clear about expressing what I need from somebody who's not going to be awake at the same time as me. So it does require some different skills and mindsets, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like you spoke to the time zones, like I said, can you elaborate more on how difficult it is sometimes to wrangle people? Because I know a friend who used to do work on an MMO, and like the majority of the team was in Korea, so he would have to upload the server changes to Korea before he left, and in the morning get notes. And they had this kind of like, but if like someone didn't get the notes or didn't get it out in time, everything would start to get backed up. Like, is it difficult to make sure those situations like that don't snowball into getting really far behind and making your milestones?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it requires a fair bit of trust, and people need to be like self-motivated enough, you know, like if you don't know what you're working on right now, like you need to go talk to somebody or figure it out. And because you don't always have somebody there with you all the time. But yeah, I think I was trying to say earlier, I think like one of the main things that I think is really important is just sharing as much as possible. Like you almost want to overshare. We record every meeting, and you know, pretty much, you know, there's some behind closed door stuff, but we really want like everything to be accessible. So if you care about a particular part of the project, even if you're not like on that strike team or whatever, you can pay attention and get a sense for what's going on. So I think it requires a bit more proactive kind of attitude, you know. People aren't gonna, at least at Unknown Worlds, like it's not like you're just gonna get a task list and like, okay, check back in 2 weeks. Like you need to be a little bit more proactive, I think.
It's funny you mentioned the commute, because I mean, I don't think people realize how much time a day they spend in the car overall. Like even if it's just an hour one way to work, that's 2 hours a day every day for X amount of years. That's a lot of time you lose either working at your company or spending time with your family or just time for yourself. It's pretty brutal. And a lot of companies today, you know, they signed before in 2019, signed leases to these gigantic offices that are very pretty. But I just think about the revenue it costs to rent that office space out that could be dumped into the game development side. You know what I mean? You're spending $9,000 a month leasing an office. That could be over a course of 3 years. That's a lot of money you could have dumped back into the dev cycle, into the game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think distributed development is it's sort of more fundamentally humane, because it's trusting people to take care of their own time and respecting that you have to respect that people just like are managing their time themselves. Like if somebody is not feeling well and needs to sleep in, like we're not watching hours. It's like we're watching whether or not you're getting work done, you're making a contribution to the game. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's something, a lot of people are reckoning with for the first time now. And I have a lot of friends in the game industry who are working at studios, and suddenly their studio is just completely changed. and they just have to learn all these new techniques, and not everybody is necessarily great at managing the transition. So
do you think the future of game development will be remote work and like remote offices moving forward?
I think it's just increased. Like if COVID demonstrated anything, I think there are a lot of people who are resistant to the idea now are like, oh, this actually can work. Like, I think there was a lot of reflexive, oh, we can't do this. Like, there's no substitute for being in person. Like, we have to be in the same rooms that we can just, like,
right. We have to make sure you're working.
What? Yeah. So, right. So we can make sure you're working is really what it's about. But I mean, some people do better in an environment where they can be in a room with somebody all day and like work on a whiteboard together. But you find substitutes, like we got really into, I don't know if you know the software Miro. It's sort of like, digital whiteboard software, multi-user, web-based, and it's brilliant. And it like in many ways, it's actually kind of better than an actual whiteboard because it's infinite and it's, and it's asynchronous, and it's so it's just like learning the tools and finding the right tools to help you communicate in a different context. So I think yeah, moving forward, more studios will continue to be remote, or they'll allow employees to work remotely, I hope. I think we'll see more of that in the future.
Yeah, I definitely think it's also a matter of, I think security has gotten a lot more affordable and better than it was 10 years ago. A lot of times these games are on closed off servers that are only accessible on a closed network in the studio. And I remember a lot of big companies were struggling with that last year, because now they have to use security over a network, that has to be secure so you can connect to the servers and not lose any information. But I think that's gotten incredibly more reasonable in terms of cost and more efficient as well.
Yeah, and I think, well, for our studio, like, it's not that we don't have to concern ourselves with security, but, for Subnautica, we've been in early access for so long, it feels like there's almost no secrets. I mean, there are some. We've had some end game stuff leaked, and we had to talk to some people, but our attitude is more like share everything that we can, like that we're comfortable sharing, and like be open and honest. And in a way that's sort of like it's almost like a marketing angle. It's just a way for us to stand out. Like we can't compete with Ubisoft in terms of like final game production quality, but like we can do things in development that they probably won't do, just like talking to our community regularly, like releasing all the time and not worrying about having to polish up every single aspect of the game before a release. So yeah, I don't know, I think it's one of the things that makes us a little different.